Hi guys, so welcome to CSAT 2025. We are bringing to you the analysis of this paper. On the day of the paper, we had discussed in brief what the paper was all about. So in brief, of course, they were the questions were moderate to difficult. There were just 4 questions that were easy. The rest were sort of doable, but you had to spend a bit of time in looking at the questions and understanding them. Let's not waste any time. Let's get into the thick of things and let's understand the paper. My name is Abhilasha, by the way, and of course, I'll take you through this. So here is GS paper. Please understand this is set D. Okay, so I'm taking up set D. Okay, for questions 1 and 2, here's your passage. So each state in India faces a distinctive set of challenges regarding the impact of warming. Okay, so that means there are different states which are having a different or distinctive, very easily identifiable set of challenges regarding what is the impact of warming, but also offers its own set of opportunities also for reducing emissions. So all the states have different natural resources and therefore they can reduce the emissions also in different manners. For example, coastal states need to take action to protect their shores from sea level rise. Districts that are drier need to prepare for variable monsoon preparation. So different states will have to prepare for different things. Himalayan regions have their own unique challenges and selected parts of peninsular India and offshore areas offer great opportunities for harnessing wind power. So every portion of the country has different issues and different advantages also. These various aspects need to be considered for developing clear and sustainable goals for the future. So essentially the author is saying that every state has to take into consideration their own resources and then correspondingly create their plans of action. Let's look at the question. What is the most logical, rational and pragmatic message that is conveyed by the author of the passage? Let's take a look. So mitigation and adaptation strategies to address or tackle the climate change is essentially the responsibility of every state. Please understand, it is saying responsibility. Is it essentially the responsibility of every state? No, the passage does not say that. Passage says that each state has different resources and therefore different plans of action. But is it their responsibility? We really cannot say that. Okay, so no. Let's look at the second one. India is too diverse to implement any effective strategy or program to address or tackle the climate change. Now, this was something that the passage has just not mentioned, that India is too diverse so that they cannot have any plan. That's too extreme an option and not the right one. It is basically the responsibility of the union government to implement the climate action plan and ensure net zero emission. Now, where did net zero emission come from? We don't know. And also the passage does not say that it is the union government's responsibility, right? So therefore that's not the message that the passage is conveying. Let's look at the last option also. India needs to formulate effective climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies at the state level. Yes, this is what our passage said also, that every state you would have to have a different policy, different plan depending on different natural resources that the state has. So the correct answer here will be option number D. Okay. All right. Let's look at the second question of the set. The second question says which of these assumptions have been made. So you are given 2 assumptions and you have to identify which of these is the correct assumption. Green energy production can be linked to or integrated with the climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies. Now remember, where were we talking of green energy? We were talking of opportunities of harnessing wind power. Now wind power of course was green energy, right? So green energy here is where we can get green energy from, and it can be of course merged in the mitigation issues, right? So therefore one can be assumed. I will write A here. Effects of climate change are much more severe in coastal and mountainous region. Are much more severe in coastal and mountainous regions. Let's take a look. So he says, depending on its own resource. For example, coastal states need to take action to protect their shores from sea level rise. districts that are drier. Himalayan regions have their own unique challenges, and selected part of peninsular and offshore areas offer great opportunities. So these have to be considered. Now these have been mentioned specifically to show that here are problem areas, and these you would need to consider. So therefore this can also be assumed by us. So therefore your answer is going to be both 1 and 2, which is option number C. Okay. Alright, let's go to the next passage. Now interestingly, this exam had a number of passages. All the passages were 2 question or 1 question. There was not even 1 3 question passage. So here's questions 3 and 4, your passage. If the social inequality is the most acutely felt social problem. So he's saying that if social inequality is the problem that is most severe or most severely understood or felt, insecurity is the most acutely felt economic problem. So that means there are 2 problems. Social inequality is the social problem. Insecurity is the economic problem. So these are your 2 problems that you have. Besides those below the official poverty line, even those just over the poverty line, तो जो poverty line के नीचे वो तो हैं ही, but जो poverty line के ऊपर भी हैं, जरा सा ऊपर हैं, are subject to multiple economic insecurities of various kinds. So even those people are facing economic insecurities due to wealth or health risk, market fluctuation, job related uncertainties. Many government policies are actually intended towards mitigating these insecurities. So government policies are trying to reduce these insecurities or trying to make people less insecure because of this economic issues, right? Alright, let's look at our question. So question number 1 here says, what is the critical message that is conveyed by the passage? Okay, so let's take a look at our options. Option number 1 said, India's political executive should be aware that poverty and social inequality and the consequent sense of insecurity is the main social problem. Now see, this is incorrect according to the passage. Why? Because insecurity was an economic problem and not a social problem. So therefore the first option is actually incorrect or false. So I'm eliminating that. Let's look at the second option. The second option says in India, poverty is the primary reason for social inequality. Correct. But is it also the primary reason for insecurity? No. That was not mentioned in the passage. Please understand. Social inequality is happening because of is the social problem, and economic inequality is the reason for insecurity. So this one again is false. Look at C. Poverty and social inequality are so intricately linked. Poverty and social inequality are so intricately linked that they pose an unmanageable crisis. Passage does not say that it is unmanageable. It says that the government is taking action. So therefore C is very contradictory to the passage. Insecurity more than poverty is the main economic issue that government policies must address. Now please understand, insecurity more than poverty, here it is the most acutely felt economic problem. So according to the government, it is, or according to this passage's author, poverty is a problem but insecurity is a bigger problem. So therefore the correct answer has to be option D. That is what is being very clearly mentioned here. Let's look at the next question. So same passage, with reference to the above passage, what assumptions have been made? Let's take a look at the assumptions. People above the poverty line also are prone to suffer from anxiety about economic insecurity. So even those just over the poverty line are subject to multiple economic insecurities. So very clear answer, right? So assumed. Look at the second one. Eradication of poverty can result in peace and social equality. We don't know what it can result in. Peace, how do I know that? We don't know. So therefore the second one cannot be assumed. So answer will be one only, which is option number A. So this was one of the easier sets that we had, definitely. Let's look at the next one. So 11 and 12, here are your questions. Okay, so let's read and understand. So in our country, regrettably, teaching and learning for the examination have been our forte. Okay, so what has been forte means something that you're really good at. So teaching and learning for exams, exam purpose is what we are very good at. But, so now the author's true thought comes out. The new demands of society and the future of work, so society and work require critical and independent thinking, learning through doing, asking questions from multiple disciplinary perspectives on the same issue, using evidence for building arguments and reflecting and articulation. So now, because of what society is going to be or what it is actually, and because work has changed its nature, just simple teaching and learning for exams won't help. You will have to look at things critically, you will have to analyze them, you will have to try and get evidence, you will have to ask questions, independent thinking. All of that becomes very, very important. Also thinking and articulation, so thinking and speaking also becomes very important. Higher education should not either be a mere servant of government policy or a passive respondent to public mood. So what higher education cannot be is a servant or a slave to government policy, or a passive respondent. So however the public mood is, you respond accordingly. That's not what higher education should be. Higher learning, now see, higher learning is all about how to think rather than what to think. So it is how to think. You are developing a thinking process, not what you are thinking about. Teaching has to be reinvented. So everything that we knew about teaching will have to change, and we'll have to change the way we are thinking also. Alright, let's look at this question. Which one of the following statement best reflects the central idea of the passage? Okay, what is the central idea of the passage? Let's take a look. So India does not have enough resources for promoting quality education in its universities. Well, the thing is that we don't know if it has enough resources or not. This is something that is not mentioned, so this is alien to us. I am eliminating this. Look at option number B. The institutions of higher learning should not be under the control of the government. Again, from where in the passage did the author, tell you this? Nowhere. So I am eliminating this also. Classroom approach to higher education should be done away with. Okay, so he is saying that you need to do away with the classroom approach, the way you are taught in school. And option D says classroom needs to be reimagined and teaching needs to be reinvented. And that is what the passage was all about, that you really need to start thinking in a different way. Whatever you're teaching has to now focus on how to think and not what to think. So therefore that complete reinvention of teaching and classroom learning has to change or reorient. So the best answer here will be option number D. Okay, I hope you got that. Alright, let's look at the second question of this set. So this one says, what is the assumption that has been made? So assumption is, higher education is a constantly evolving subject that needs to align towards new development in all spheres of the society. So he's saying that higher education is evolving and it has to align towards, it has to make a link to all other spheres of life. See, we had said that the new demands of society and future of work require different types of thinking. And so essentially what we are saying is that higher education will need to change, right? So the first one definitely can be assumed. Look at the second one. Sufficient funds are not allocated for promoting higher education. How did we understand that funds are not allocated? This was not something that you could understand from the passage. So therefore cannot be assumed. So answer will be one only. Okay. I hope you got that. Okay, let's do 13 and 14 also. So here's your passage. Let's take a minute and read it. So if there is inequality in the pattern of population growth, there is greater inequality in food production and utilization. Okay, so he's saying that if the pattern of population growth is unequal, how population is growing, it is growing differently. food production and utilization is also growing differently. So there is greater inequality there. So population is big, but food in production and utilization has greater inequalities, right? As societies become wealthier, so you have more money, their consumption of animal products increases. So you start eating more of the animals. This means that a greater proportion of such basic foodstuff as grains and legumes that could feed humans directly is instead being converted into feed for poultry and large farm animals. So because when we become richer, we start eating more meats, more dairy products. So what could have been food for us directly, right, now becomes food for the animals. Yet, so now author's new thought, this conversion of plant-based food into animal foods is far from efficient. So what you are saying is that वो जो हम घास जानवर को खिला रहे हैं या पेड़ खिला रहे हैं, legumes खिला रहे हैं, that when it converts into animals and that animal is used to feed humans, that efficiency is very low. So in 100 kgs of grass, we could feed 100 humans for 1 month, let us say. But 100 kgs of grass is sufficient only to feed, let's say 5 cows for a day, or let's say 5 cows for 10 days. So that, and then those 5 cows can only feed 50 humans. So what you could have used for 100 humans, now you're only using for, let's say 5 humans or 10 humans or 50 humans. So there is inefficiency there. Only 16% of the calories fed to chickens are recovered by us when we eat them. So imagine you're putting in 100 calories into the chicken, and what are you getting? You're only getting 16 calories. The human is getting only 16 calories. So what a lot of loss. 84% of calorie loss ho raha hai. This conversion rate goes down to 5 to 7% in large animals. So now you have cow, beef, even larger, so therefore less. So if you feed 100 calories to a cow, you only get 7 calories. That's on the higher side. So imagine 93% loss ho raha hai. That are fed grain to add fat and some protein before slaughter. So there is a lot of food that is going out, that is being wasted. Okay, so that was what. Let's look at the question. The question says, what is the crux of the passage? So the crux of the passage, guys, here, there is an urgent need for a public policy to promote the consumption of cereal-based food in wealthier society. There may be an urgent need, but that was not what the passage said. Please understand, the crux is what the author has said. Okay, not what the author wants you to understand. So therefore A cannot be right. Look at B. Okay, animal-based food is far less efficient than grain or plant-based food in terms of production and utilization, and we have just proved that, haven't we? So this looks like a good answer to me. Let me put a star here, huh? Look at C. Plant-based protein should replace animal-based protein in our daily diets. Why just protein? Why are we only talking of substitution of protein and nothing else? We want to substitute all sorts of food. So therefore C is again, and protein was something that was not really the crux of the passage. This was something that you can infer but is not written in the passage. Inequality in food production and consumption is inevitable in any fast changing society. Now here there were two keywords that you had to pay attention to. One was inevitable, which means 100% certain, and the second is fast changing society. Both of these are not mentioned, therefore D cannot be right. So we come back to option B and say that's our correct answer. Okay? Alright, let's look at the second one. What is the assumption here? Okay. So let's see. Food manufacturing and processing industries in every country should align their objectives and processes in accordance with the changing need of society. Well, we did not even come to food manufacturing and processing industries. So even though we have spoken about conversion of animal plant feed into animal feed, right? But that does not really say that we are talking of food manufacturing and processing needing to align with the needs of the society. Wealthier societies tend to incur great loss of calories of food material due to indirect utilization of their agricultural produce. Now that was something that we could understand from the passage. The entire passage was focused towards telling you that it is the richer countries, the wealthier countries where more animals are being eaten, right? And because more animals are being eaten, they are actually wasting a lot of calorie in conversion of animal plant calories to animal calories. So therefore 2 is something that you can assume, and therefore your answer is going to be B2 only. Okay, I hope you got that. Let's look at 21 and 22, your passage here. Okay. Maintaining an ecosystem just to conserve biodiversity will affect its commercial potential as well as the livelihood dependent on the ecosystem. So if I have to maintain an ecosystem just because I want to conserve the animal and plant life within that, that is going to cost the commercial potential. So we cannot extract all the commercial benefit. Also we cannot, all the livelihoods that depend on that ecosystem, they will get impacted. There is also a conflict. Okay, so one more conflict between using an ecosystem only for livelihoods, for commercial exploitation, or strictly for conservation. So there will always be this conflict between these three. Am I using it only for livelihoods? Am I using only for commercial exploitation? Or am I using it only for conservation? So that's a problem. Deforestation. Okay, so we come to deforestation caused due to commercial exploitation. Okay, so when commercial exploitation means you're cutting down a forest to sell the wood. Okay, that's commercial exploitation. So when you cut down the forest, deforestation is happening. That will lead to indirect harm like floods, siltation problems, and microclimatic instability. So because I've taken away the plants from a forest, the trees from a forest, so there are going to be the soil does not stick. There will be floods. There will be the microclimate gets affected. So many things. Also, it will adversely affect livelihoods that are dependent on the forest also. If the forest is gone, what about the people who are dependent on it? These conflicts are particularly acute. Acute means very serious, in developing countries, where the dependence of people on the ecosystem is significant. So people are majorly dependent on the ecosystem. So that's going to be a big problem. And commercial exploitation has the potential to boost national income. So when you commercially exploit the forest, you have the national income could also probably go up. Okay, so that's your passage. Let's take a look at the questions. So question number 1 for this passage. What is the critical message that is conveyed by the author? What is it that the author is trying to tell you? Conservation of biodiversity is not an issue to be worried about when some people depend on ecosystems for their livelihood. No, but we want to conserve the biodiversity because if you don't conserve the biodiversity, there is still problem for those who are dependent on the forest for the livelihood. So this is false and not the right answer. Let's look at the second option. Commercial exploitation of forest goes against the fundamental rights of the people. Where did we speak of fundamental rights? We did not. So this is something that is alien to us and therefore incorrect. Not part of what we've discussed, right? Sustenance of livelihood and degradation of ecosystem while being together exacerbate one another, leading to conflicts and imbalance. The entire passage was all about this, that if you try to sustain the ecosystem, then the people who are dependent on it will find it problematic. If you try to conserve the forest, people are having problems. If you do away the forest, the people may immediately not, they may just earn money from commercial exploitation, but in the long run, the people who are actually dependent on the forest will have a problem. So there is this tussle that is going on. So C is a good choice. Let's also look at D and then we will eliminate. Commercial exploitation of ecosystems should be complete. Please understand, when you say should be completely stopped, this is an extreme option. Also because the passage has here said commercial exploitation has the potential to boost national income. So can we totally do away with it? No. So I'll eliminate D. My best answer is going to be option number C. Let's look at the second question. Okay, so what is the assumption? The good thing about these sets are that there is one main idea question and there is one assumption question. So you know that there's going to be something that can be assumed. No country needs to depend on ecosystem to boost national income. Well, that's something that was absolutely incorrect. The passage did not say anything like that. So eliminate. Resource-rich countries need to share their resources with those of scant resources. We don't know who needs to share. This is too much gyan or too much advice. Please understand, advice never advisable. So answer is going to be D, neither 1 nor 2. Okay, I hope you got that. Let's come to the next one, 23 and 24. Here's your passage. The history of renewable energy. So from what I know of renewable energy suggests that there is a steep learning curve, meaning that as more is produced, the cost falls rapidly. So the production goes up, the cost goes down because of economies of scale. So production and cost are not directly proportional, inversely proportional. Because of economies of scale and learning by doing. So these two things, because you do large scale production, you learn from, your mistakes. So it becomes easier and there is much more to be, so the cost can be reduced. The firm's green innovation is path dependent. If a firm is trying to go green, then that is dependent on their path, the one that they are taking, right? So what is this path that we are talking about? The more a firm does, the more it is likely to do in the future. So if you get onto the path of green innovation or green change, then you will do more of it. The strongest evidence for this is in the collapse in the price of solar energy. So solar energy prices have gone down, which became about 90% cheaper during the 2010s, repeatedly beating forecasts. It has gone down. Why? Because you are doing more and more, you understand it is more profitable, so more of it is done. Moving early and gradually. So if you move quick, you're in the starting phase, and moving very slowly and smoothly gives economies more time to adjust. So you get more time to adjust and you reap the benefits of path dependent green investment without much disruption. So if you're in the early stages of something and you start going green, you start picking up solar energy, then what happens is it becomes easier for you. It becomes gradual and it is not as expensive also. A late, more chaotic transition is costlier. So if you get into the transition at a later phase, then it will be slightly more expensive. That's what we are saying. Alright, let's look at the question. So question says, which of the following best reflects the central idea of the passage? So option number 1, economies of scale is essential for transition to green growth. This causal relationship was not mentioned in the passage. So while it may be true, we don't know if it is. Modern technological progress is intensely linked to path-dependent innovations. Is it intensely linked? Please understand this is an extreme word, therefore not correct. Countries with large economies are in a better position to adopt green technologies. This comparison that they are better equipped or less equipped, we don't know. So not C also. So therefore D has to be the best answer, but let's take a look. Timing plays a crucial role in the case of green technology development as well adoption. So this is what the passage had said. I'll tell you, I'll point out this portion to you. Moving early and gradually gives economies more time to adjust, allowing them to reap the benefits. So the third last line actually shows you that. And then the last line also says that if you get into it late, then there's going to be a problem. Okay. So therefore D is a very good choice of answer for us. Let's look at the second question of this set. So what is the assumption that has been made? Path-dependent green investments will eventually most likely benefit growth as well as public finance in a country like India. Now, when we were discussing this question, we had two problems. One was that like India mention किया है, but problem ये नहीं है. Problem ये इसलिए नहीं है because you're mentioning a country like India. You're not mentioning India specifically. So it is something that you can assume. So the problem doesn't lie there. Where does the problem lie? It lies in public finance. Were we really talking of public finance here? Anywhere? No. So therefore, one doesn't work for us. Okay, let's look at the second one. If other green technologies follow the same pattern as that of solar energy, there will most likely be an easy green transition. So we have already said that solar energy, the cost went down drastically by almost 90% because a lot of people adopted it in the early phases. So if there are other green energies also and they work in the same way, then definitely it could be an easy green transition. Remember, there is an if here, so it is a conditional statement, and this conditional statement can be assumed very well. So therefore this should be something that we assume. So answer will be B2 only. Okay, I hope you got that. Alright, let's look at the next set, 31 and 32. Here we go. Okay. So one of the dismal realities of the agriculture sector in independent India has been, this is not has been, it is has been that it never experienced a high growth phase, unlike the non-agricultural economy. So dismal is sad. So the sad reality is what of agriculture, that it's never had a very high growth phase. कभी बहुत बढ़िया से नहीं हुआ. Baki non-agriculture economy has grown. It has had a high growth phase also. The highest decadal growth, decadal means decade wise, compound annual growth rate or CAGR for agriculture has been just 3 to 5% in 1980s, and that was the highest. Okay. Also, after experiencing a spurt in decadal growth in the 1980s, it suffered relative stagnation. So it hasn't grown after that. This is in sharp contrast to non-agriculture growth, which consistently increased from the 1980s to the 2000s. So if you compare agricultural growth and non-agricultural growth, so this has been greater. Okay, so that is what we have said here. Let's take a look at our question. Question number 1 here says, okay, which of the following statements best reflects the corollary to the above passage? So let's look at the options and let's try and understand which of these will be correct. So the benefit of economic reforms percolates down more slowly to agricultural sector than in other sectors of the economy. So if you look at this option, now what are the important words? Percolates down, that means it is trickling down. तो ऊपर से नीचे आ रहा है, ठीक है? Now percolation is something that will happen only if the top is heavy. Okay. So benefits of economic reforms are going down more slowly to the agriculture sector than in any other sectors. How can I say that? I can say that because non-agricultural sector growth has been higher than the agricultural sector growth. So naturally, the benefits will also trickle down slower in that segment as compared to other segments. So A is a good choice. But let me look at the other choices also. For India, the Green Revolution was not as useful as it was expected. Well, can we really say that the Green Revolution was not as useful? No. It was, it gave a response, it had a very high response. At that point of time, 3 to 5% was amazing. So can I say that it was not as useful? No. Can I look at option number C? India lagged behind other countries in adapting mechanized and modern farming. So can I take this from anywhere in the passage? Is that something that we can assume from the passage, that we have lagged behind other countries? We don't know about the other countries. For all I know, the other countries may just have had a 3 or 2% growth also. So can I say that we lag behind? Not really. So eliminate C. Rural to urban migration resulted in stagnant agricultural sector. Now again there is a problem that we don't know if there was rural to urban migration. The passage has not said anything like that. Remember, when you're looking at central idea or corollary is also one of the conclusions only. So when you're looking at questions like this, what you need to understand is your answer can only come from what is written in the passage. What is not written is something that might have been assumed, but then that would be an assumption question, right? So this is not something that if it's not written, then it's not really going to be the conclusion. You can't draw from that. So therefore, not D. We did not speak of rural to urban migration. तो यहाँ का conclusion निकल ही नहीं सकता है. So eliminate. So best answer will be option number 1 here. Let's look at the second question, same passage. So what is the assumption that has been made? Okay, so let's read and understand. So the growing divergence between the fortunes of agricultural and non-agricultural economy in India could have been reduced or contained by. So we have said that the agricultural growth was much less than the non-agricultural growth, correct? So that means the agricultural economy did not do as well as the non-agricultural economy also. That's a direct assumption. That is the corollary that we just picked up, right? So how could I have reduced this divergence? Right? That is what the question has asked. Let's take a look. By adapting large-scale cultivation of commercial crops and viable corporate farming. So if I had adopted commercial cropping and commercial farming, what would have happened? The profitability of agriculture would have gone up. So this gap between agricultural growth and non-agricultural growth would have reduced. So A is a good choice. So this is something that I can assume. Now if I provided free insurance for all crops and heavily subsidized seed, fertilizer, electricity and farm machinery at par with developed countries, again what would happen? The cost of the agriculture would reduce. So therefore the profitability would increase, correct? So therefore this is also something that I can assume, correct? So my answer should be both, which will be option number C. And that's your answer. Okay, let's look at 33 and 34. Now, this guys I felt was one of the toughest set for this exam. Okay, but let's take a look. So in our country, handlooms are equated with a culture that ensures a continuity of tradition. So handloom is equal to continuing or continuation of tradition. This idea has become part of the public policy framing and provides a legitimate basis for the state to support the sector. So because it is a legacy industry, the state or the government will support it. But the notion of tradition as a single linear entity is being strongly contested today. So now we are saying that tradition as a single linear, my father to his father to his father, that's not something that goes very well now. Okay. The narratives that are dominant in defining culture or tradition in a particular way are seen to have emerged as identities and histories of large sections. So anything that is dominant in the culture or tradition is the history of a large section of people. The discounted and at times forcibly stifled identities, so identities that have been hidden or not considered, are fighting for their rightful place. So they're also asking for history and they're saying what is it that we need to do. Against this backdrop, when we promote handloom as a traditional industry, so we are promoting it as a traditional industry, it is not surprising that large sections of our population choose to ignore it. It's really not strange or surprising that big chunks of society are ignoring it. Let's take a look at the questions. So question number 1, what is the most logical and rational message that is conveyed by the author? We need to free handloom industry from limited narrative linked to preserving cultural heritage. Yes, because people will ignore it if you're stuck to a narrative. We are stuck to a historical narrative, that of legacy. So therefore it makes sense to do away with it. So A, I'll put a star on. Let's look at the second one also. Continued state support to the handloom industry ensures the preservation of some of our glorious art forms and old traditions. Well, yes, but that's not the message of the passage. That's something that's mentioned in the passage. Household units of handloom sector should be modernized and made. We did not talk of household units, so I'm eliminating this. Handloom products need to be converted to machine-made designer products. Again, were we really concerned with that? No. So eliminate. So best answer A. Let's look at the second question also of this set. What was the assumption that was valid? There is no need for the state to be involved in any manner. No need is an extreme option. Eliminated. Okay. Handloom products are no longer appealing and attractive in the rapidly changing. Again, no longer appealing and attractive is extreme. So I will eliminate that also. So best answer will be neither 1 nor 2. And that's your correct answer. Okay. I hope you got that. Alright guys, so let's take a look at the next set, which is questions 41 to 42. Here's your passage. Okay, it is hard to predict how changes in the climate and atmosphere's chemistry will affect the prevalence and virulence of agricultural disease. So he's saying we really don't know how well we'll be able to predict how climate and atmosphere will change agricultural disease, how much prevalent it will be, how virulent it will be. Virulent means how strong it will be, right? But there is a risk that such changes will make some plant infections more common in all climatic zones, perhaps catastrophically so. So it may just be very disastrous. Part of the problem is that centuries of selective breeding have refined the genomes of most high value crops. So we have changed the high value crops genetically. They are spectacular at growing in today's conditions, but genetic variations that are not immediately useful have been bred out. So those genetic variations that you did not need, they have just gone away. Now this is good for yield, so you have high production, but bad for coping with changes because the hardy varieties are dying out, or the hardy genes have died out because they were not needed. A minor disease or even an unknown one could suddenly rampage through a genetically honed crop. So sometimes a very small disease, a small problem could just go very high and become very problematic for our crops. Let's take a look at the question. So question is, which of the following best reflects the central idea conveyed by the passage? What is the central idea? Global climate change adversely affects the productivity of crops. Well, yes, but were we talking of global climate change? No, we were talking of plants that have been genetically modified. So therefore, A is not the correct central idea of this passage. Okay, let's look at the second one. Our total dependence on genetically honed crops entails possible food insecurity. So it's possible that there will be food insecurity if we are only dependent on these genetically honed crops. So that's something that is very valid. So I'll put a star on this. Let's look at the next one. Our food security should not depend on agricultural productivity. Again, food security should not, this is an advice. I won't take that as the central idea. Let's look at the D option. Genetically honed crops should be replaced with their wild varieties. Do we really want them to be replaced with wild varieties? Because then those may not be as high yielding. So therefore not D. So we come to option B as the correct answer. Let's look at the second question of this set. What is the correct assumption here? Global climate change can result in migration of several plant diseases to new areas. We don't know. The passage does not say that it will migrate. Okay, so therefore 1 is not a very good answer for us. Okay, let's look at the second one. Scientific understanding of wild relatives of our present crops would enable us to strengthen our food security. Again, we don't know what will enable us to strengthen our food security. So therefore not 2 also. So answer will be D, neither 1 nor 2. Let's look at the next one. 43 and 44. Here's your question. So the question says, a good statesman. Now this was a difficult set, huh guys? So a good statesman, like any other sensible human being, learns more from his opponents than from his fervent supporter. So a good statesman will learn more from his opponents than from his supporters. Fervent means very passionate supporters. Obviously, because supporters will only say good things about you. The opponents will tell you all sorts of things. For his supporters will push him to disaster. The supporters will say, oh, do this, unless the opponents show him where the dangers are. So the opponent is showing him what is wrong. So if he is wise, he will often pray to be delivered from his friends because they will ruin him. So he'll say, okay, save me from my friends. But though it hurts, he ought to also pray never to be left without opponents. So the opponents are harmful, but he would always want to have opponents, right? Because they are the ones who will help you by keeping you on the narrow path, on the path of reason and good sense. The national unity of free people depends upon a sufficiently even balance of political power to make it impracticable for administration to be arbitrary and for opposition to be revolutionary and irreconcilable. So when you have when you want free people and you want a nation of free people, you have to have an even balance of politicians on both sides, on the government side and on the opposition side, so that administration or the government is not arbitrary, and the opposition is not revolutionary or irreconcilable. Let's look at the question. Question number 1 here says, what is the critical message that is conveyed by the author? Now, author here was saying that essentially you need to have a balance of people who support the government as also the people who oppose the government, because they will help you be on the right path. So let's look at the option. Without opposition, administration in a democracy gets to become more responsible. No, this is the opposite of what the passage had said. So this is contradictory. I'll eliminate this. Let's look at option number B. Democracy needs to have revolutionaries in opposition to keep the government alert. Needs to have revolutionaries. We don't want that. The author had said opposition should not be revolutionary. Therefore, B is also incorrect. Okay, eliminate. Look at C. Rulers in a democracy need the opposition, support of opposition for their political survival. Do they need the support of opposition, or do they need the opposition to oppose them? So therefore, not C also. In a democracy, the opposition is indispensable. Yes, you need them for the balance of political power. You want the government to be balanced, the country to be balanced, and good governance. Yes, D is the best answer here. Absolutely, this is what the passage has said. Okay, let's look at the second question. What is the assumption here? Now, in a democracy, a strong opposition is required only if the head of government is indifferent. No. A strong opposition is required regardless of what the government is doing. So therefore, A is not to be assumed. I'll eliminate that. Let's look at the second one. The more aggressive the opposition, the better is the governance in a democracy. Again, aggression in the opposition was not mentioned. So I'm eliminating option 2 also. So here the best answer will be D, neither 1 nor 2. Okay, I hope you got that. Okay, for question 51, here we go. So, a single number for inflation is an aggregate across different commodities and services. Okay, so inflation is aggregate across different commodities and services. The price rise differs for different items of consumption. So price rise will differ. For the single number is arrived at by assigning weights to different commodities and services. So inflation you will get by assigning weights to different commodities. For WPI, the weights are in production are used. For CPI, the consumption basket, whatever is being consumed is used. But people are not homogeneous, so everybody is not consuming the same things. So the consumption basket is vastly different for the poor, middle class and the rich. So CPI then is different for each of these classes, and a composite index requires averaging the basket. So if you're trying to create a CPI, then you will have to take all the different baskets and then make an average, and then only you are able to identify the correct CPI. Okay. Alright. So for inflation, CPI and WPI both would work. Let's look at the question. What is the most logical, rational and crucial message of this passage? So we must measure WPI exclusively in measuring price rise, and CPI should be done away with. The passage has not said that you do away with CPI. Therefore, eliminate option A. The present calculation of inflation rate does not correctly measure price rise of individual items and commodities. Well, the passage has not said anywhere that the present calculation is incorrect. So therefore not B also. Let's look at C. Inflation data under present services in the consumption basket. Okay, but does it under present it? No. Okay, I am checking this one. Knowledge of inflation is not really of... Okay, I think I'll have to go back to my passage and then check this again. Let's take a look. What is the most rational message? We must use WPI. This, of course, exclusively. So I'm eliminating this. Let me look at my other options once more. So option B says the present calculation of inflation rate does not correctly measure price rise of individual item or commodity. For CPI, the consumption basket is used, but people are not homogeneous. Consumption basket is differently for the poor, vastly different. CPI is different for, okay. Composite index requires averaging the baskets. So therefore, we are saying that it is not being done correctly. Okay, so B can be my answer. Inflation data under present services in the consumption, but services are not part of the consumption basket. Okay, so that's why C cannot be the right answer. Knowledge of inflation rate, again, that was incorrect. So the best answer here should be B, guys, okay? Let's look at the next one. Question number 52. Trust stands commonly defined as being vulnerable. So what is trust? You are vulnerable to others. Entrepreneurship implies trust in others and willingness to expose oneself to betrayal. So if you are going for entrepreneurship, then you are trusting others and you are exposing yourself to betrayal. Trust in expert systems is the essence of globalizing behavior. Trust itself emerges as a super commodity in the social market and defines the characteristics of goods and services in the global market. So that is what trust is. You are hoping that everything is going to be good. Trusting conduct also means holding others in good esteem, so hoping that they are good people, and an optimism that they are or will be competent in certain respects. So that is what you are hoping for. Let's look at the question. So the question is, which of the following best represents the crux of the passage? Well, the crux of the passage essentially was that trust is important. Even though trust has risks, you have to have trust. If you are going to be an entrepreneur, you will require to trust people and open yourself up for the risks that are there. So trustworthiness cannot be expected in entrepreneurship. Well, this is exact opposite of the passage. Passage said you have to have trust. Trustworthy people are the most vulnerable. The problem is with the word most vulnerable. We don't know if they are the most vulnerable. So do away with B. No economic activity is possible without being exposed to. Again, this is an extreme option. We don't know if there is no economic activity that is possible, right? So therefore eliminate C. Trust is important though it entails risk. Yes, this is what the author has been speaking of in this passage. So correct answer D. Let's look at the next one. Here's question number 61 and 62. Okay, over the next 30 years, many countries are promising to net zero carbon, implying that household emissions will have to be cut to close to nothing. So many countries are saying that they will have net zero carbon and household emissions will come to zero. A leading climate scientist reckons that at best half the reduction might be achieved through demand side measures. So you may reduce it by 50% on the demand side. So if you reduce the demand, such as behavioral changes by individuals and households. So if individuals and households change their behavior, 50% of the demand would go down. And even that would require companies and government to provide more incentives to change through supply side investment. So the supply has to be such also to make low carbon options cheaper and more widely available. So you want the low carbon options to be there, you want them to be cheaper, and you want them to work for you. Okay, let's take a look at the question. The first question here was, what is the central idea that is conveyed by the passage? Okay, let's take a look. Moving to net zero carbon is possible only by the reduction in household emission. No, this is something that is incorrect according to the passage. Passage has said that you have to have it on both sides. Option number B says low carbon behavior in people can be brought about by incentivizing them. Okay, yes, this is something that is possible. If both the demand side and the supply side also helps, that is when low carbon behavior can happen. So B is a possible answer. Cheaper goods and services can be made available to people by using low carbon technologies. We don't know if cheaper goods and services can be made. They have said maybe make low carbon technologies cheaper, but that does not mean that cheaper goods and services. So this causal relationship is not existing here. Okay, let's look at option D. Manufacturing industries that use low carbon technologies should be provided with subsidies. What they should be done or should not be done is not something that we are concerned with. So answer will be B. Let's look at the second question. What is the assumption that has been made here? Supply side investments in companies can result in low carbon behavior. Well, yes, this is something that the passage has said very clearly. So one can be assumed. Look at the second one. People are not capable of adapting low carbon behavior without the involvement of government and companies. The problem is, if you only depend on the people, then 50% of the thing can be done. But how about the rest of it? That will happen only when the government and the companies are involved. That is what the passage has said. 50% from demand side, 50% from supply side. So therefore the second also has to be assumed. So correct answer will be C, both 1 and 2. Okay. Alright, let's look at the next one. For 63 and 64, here's your passage. So let's take a look. In only 50 years, the world's consumption of raw materials has nearly quadrupled. That means it has gone up by 4 times. Okay, quadrupled is 4 times. So to nearly 100 billion tons. Okay, less than 9% of this is reused. Batteries of old vehicles contain materials such as lithium, cobalt, manganese and nickel that are pricey and can be hard to obtain. Supply chains are long and complicated, so difficult hai. Buyers' risks are being aggravated by their suppliers' poor environmental and lower labor standards. Reusing material makes sense. Once batteries reach the end of their life, they should go back to a factory where the ingredients can be recovered and put into new batteries. Okay, so let's take a look at this question. Here's your question. What is the most rational, pragmatic message conveyed by the passage? So, green economy is not possible without reusing credit. We don't know if it is possible or not. Okay. Every sector of economy should adapt the reuse of material resources immediately. Now, this is an extreme option. Why? Because every sector, can we really do that? No. So, I'm eliminating B. Okay, let's look at C. Circular economy can be beneficial for sustainable growth. Yes, that is what we were saying. Take out material from the used batteries, etc. and bring it back into the new one. So that can be good. Circular use of material resources is the only option. Now the problem is with the words only option, extreme, so eliminate. So best answer will be C. Let's look at the next question. Okay, what is the assumption here? So assumption is automobile factories are examples of circular economy. Can we assume this? No. Economic growth is compatible with circular use of mineral resources. Yes, both will happen, correct? So therefore A is possible. Sorry, I mean 2 can be assumed. So answer will be B, 2 only. Alright, let's go to the last set. I think this will be the last set, I don't know. 71 and 72, okay. There has been no democracy that has grown economically without corporate capitalism. So you have to have corporate capitalism for economy to grow. Very strong words. It helps in modernizing the economy, enabling the transition from rural to urban, agriculture to industries and services. Now it generates jobs. Okay. It gives a further impetus to private business. They can, because big companies can operate on large scale and become competitive both domestically and externally. A vibrant corporate capitalist base also leads to additional revenues for the state. So you have additional revenues which can be used for greater welfare for the marginalized and creating a more level playing field in terms of opportunities. Alright, let's take a look. What is the critical message that is conveyed by the author of the passage? So what is it that the author is really trying to convey? Corporate capitalism is important for economic growth of a state and also for democracy. Well, yes, I'll put a star on this, okay? Let me look at 2. Corporate capitalism is imperative for a modern state to achieve its political objective. Is this causal relationship mentioned in the passage and is it the crux of the passage? No. So I'm eliminating B. Okay. Let me look at C. No state can ensure its economic survival for long without the role of corporate capitalism. Again, too extreme. So I'm eliminating that. Okay. Corporate capitalism and democracy have mutual dependence for their continued existence. They have mutual dependence, again, was not the critical message that was being conveyed. So critical message, yes, that corporate capitalism is important for the economic growth of the country and also for the democracy. Let's look at the next question. Oops. Okay, here you are. What is the assumption that has been made? Okay, so assumption number 1. Corporate capitalism promotes the growth of labor force and provides more employment opportunities. Well, it had said it generates jobs, but it promotes the growth of labor force was not mentioned. Okay, so therefore one cannot be assumed. Okay, I hope you understand. The second one, poor and marginalized sections of population are benefited by corporate capitalism due to its trickle down effect. Yes, that is true, because it says which in turn can be used for greater welfare for the marginalized and creating a more level playing field in terms of opportunity. So this is something that is very clearly mentioned. So therefore the second one is a valid assumption. So then my answer has to be option number B, which is 2 only. Alright, let's take a look at question number 73. And okay, this is a very interesting question, question number 73, which says a network of voluntary associations stand as a buffer between the relatively powerless individual and the potentially powerful state. So you have voluntary associations which connect the individual and the state. Okay, and I am looking for what is the best explanation of this above passage. Okay, so take a look at what is the explanation here. The explanation clearly says, guys, okay, let's take a look. It emphasizes the inability of the state to enforce its will in practice against the opposition of certain groups. No, it doesn't emphasize the inability of the state. So 1 is not right. Okay, let's look at 2. Okay, 2 says it is a cooperative organization for the promotion of the well-being and development of the personality. Are we really talking of the personality of the members? No. So therefore I am eliminating option B also. It takes individuals out of a state of isolation and gives them a chance to participate in a common endeavor. So the individual who is isolated, who is by himself, is connected by these voluntary associations to the state. So therefore the individual comes out of isolation and can connect. Yes, this can be an answer, but I want to look at the last one. It permits citizens to have a variety of loyalties and allegiance. No, the citizen is not given the opportunity to have a variety of loyalties and allegiance. That would be incorrect. So therefore not D. So best answer will be option number C. Now this was probably one of the tougher questions that we had in this paper. Alright. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the verbal section. I hope I have been able to explain this to you. Thank you so much everybody. I will see you around for the next time. All the best for your results.